Today, we're on step 3, and where we have come from, and I try to simplify and make sense out of the steps as far as possible, because, and to summarize so far, step 1, we are killing ourselves, and whatever is causing it is something that I can't control with my conscious thinking mind. No matter how vigilant it is, no matter how much insight I have, no matter how determined I am and sincere, I am unable to control my unconscious mind. Sigmund Freud, who should have known, one of the things he described, he said to therapists, he said, when you tell people something is happening on their unconscious mind, he said what they do inevitably is they'll look up at a corner of the room, furrow their brow, and say, no, I don't think so. And he says, then you have to ask them, where did you go and look? And with what? So you went down the cellar steps into your unconscious with the flashlight of your conscious mind to search the corners of your and you come back up the steps and report you didn't find anything. How much sense does that make? So when we have a behavior that keeps recurring and defeating our best interests and our best intentions, we know from that that something is happening beneath the shallow level of consciousness. And this is where this illness resides. And so that's step 1, powerless over alcohol. Step 2, we heard from other people. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Simplified form, we heard that other people with the same problem found a solution. That's all step 2 says. We heard from other people, they found a solution. And to make it into some sort of third-rate religious experience is just silly. And it's harmful besides, because it sends people off on a religious track, which then they're back doing what was already not working for thousands of years before 1935 when AA came into existence. So you don't want to go off down some path that will not be working. And if you take steps 2 and then step 3 and start off on a religious path with them, you're back to what wasn't working. And if you go out of a treatment center counting on doing what wasn't working, well, I don't have to finish that sentence, right? See you later, kind of, in a bad way. So step 3 then is made a decision. And step 3 says, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand. Made a decision to do something. Does that mean I did it?
No.
No. Are you all familiar with the little arithmetic puzzle? 3 frogs are sitting on a log in a pond. You got it? The pond, a log, 3 frogs. Okay. One of the frogs decides to jump in the water. How many frogs are now left on the log?
3. 2.
None.
3. The log fell because they're off of balance.
He decided to. He didn't do it yet.
He didn't do it.
Oh,
He only decided to do it. So, are any of you list makers? Oh, yeah, good. You're list makers. You make lists. Do you sometimes confuse making the list for doing it? Yeah, sometimes you get a relief, don't you? Once you have made the list, you've sort of got it organized in your mind, and you relax. And then, of course, you don't get to it. Or sometimes you do. But what my point is, don't confuse making a list or the decision to do something with actually doing it, right? Because that's where we fail. And people are going around in the program, you'll hear them at meetings talking about, every day I make the decision over and over and over again. I make the decision over and over again. And yeah, you're just making a new list. But you need, and I had this brought to my attention because I was one of those people. And this guy, Walter, that I talked about, I used to go to the Monday night meeting in the recovery house, and he said to me, what step are you on? And I said, I'm on step 3. And for about 6 months, he asked me what step I was on, and I said I was on step 3. And finally he said, after about 6 months, how will you know you have taken step 3? Now this, you have to remember, was the 1970s. So I gave a 70s answer. I guess I'll get a feeling. In the 70s, everything was feelings, you know. So I guess I'll get a feeling. And he said, if you had come in here every Monday night for the last 6 months and had asked me, Walter, what have you got on this week? And I said, I've decided to go to San Francisco. And every Monday, with renewed enthusiasm, I answered your question, I've decided to go to San Francisco. And in 6 months, I'm still saying, I've decided to go down to San Francisco. How would you know I had actually decided to go to San Francisco?
When you came back and told him?
Huh?
When you came back and told him about your trip?
Or,
Send me a postcard.
or maybe watched him drive toward Davis from Sacramento, right? That you might get a clue then, right? That at least he was on the way. He wasn't just doing something in his head. So that's why I say sometimes when it comes to the program, our brains fall out. You know, we wind up doing silly stuff and trying to con ourselves with silly stuff that we would never do in real life. And so step 3, all it is, if you've made a decision. Remember yesterday when I talked about hearing about the guy who could fix the Saab? I came in and I told Diane, I said, I've decided I'm going to take the car to Sven. As the result of that decision, did the car run any better? No. So, this is what I'm saying. Sometimes when it comes to something like this, we lose our common sense. And so you have to, don't check your brains at the door. You know, bring your brain in with you to treatment. And so we made a decision. Now, this word here is confused all the time with choice. I chose this, I chose that. And so, because back in the Stone Age when I went through seminary, everything was in Latin. We studied philosophy in Latin. We did our exams in Latin. So the result is I'm going to inflict some Latin on you. You see this part of this word? De-cisio. This word here means I cut. I cut. In fact, it's the word we also get, de-cisio, we get scissors from it. But if you put in, incision is to cut in, excision, cut out. Circumcision means to cut around. Right. Ouch. Yeah. So we use this word all the time. So the question is, what is de-cisio? De-cisio is to cut off. And it's the word in Latin for pruning, like pruning a tree. If you have a fruit tree and you have too many branches on it, how do you improve the quality of the fruit? You prune off some branches. And so the word de-cisio, it means that I have a choice of paths. I come up to those of you who have had some exposure to AA will remember a phrase that says, we stood at a turning point. Remember that? You've heard that? We stood at a turning point and we made a decision, right? Our life energy, and this applies to all sorts of things, your career even, relationships, everything. You come up to a turning point, and how do you go on from that junction? What do you have to do? You have to decision one. You have to cut one away. And that's the relevance of decision. It's an old Latin word. It comes, Julius Caesar used it in his army. The decision, the cutting away of options. And so when we are setting out in sobriety, we may be of two minds. Have you ever heard that expression? He's of two minds. And what does two minds mean?
Two different thoughts.
He has two different thoughts, also called a dilemma, right? A dilemma. You'll say sometimes somebody's on the horns of a dilemma. That it means that he's torn between two ways to go. And yeah, right. And we resolve that because we can't wholeheartedly go in both directions simultaneously. So what we have to do in order to move our life along, whatever it is, we have to eliminate options. And then once we have done that, our energy is free and we can be single-minded. And if any of you have ever been coached by, in some athletic activity, one of the things a coach does is a coach tries to keep you focused. What does focusing mean? Focusing means that you don't allow your mind to get, and if your mind is diffused into a number of paths, your energy will be diffused. So if you're a swimmer, as they swim coach up in Arden Hills in Sacramento, who coached Mark Spitz and Debbie Meyer and some of these great swimmers, one of his adamant points was, if you have a swimmer, it doesn't matter how good they are physically, if they cannot be single-minded. if halfway through their workout they start wondering should they maybe have gone out for baseball, immediately it is reflected in their time. Their muscles lose energy just by the fact that the mind starts entertaining alternatives. Are any of you runners? Do you run like regularly, any of you? Well, regular runners will tell you this, that, you know, if they run like, say, 5 miles a day, and someday they go out and they start entertaining the idea of maybe stopping after 2 miles, they start to lose energy. And getting that energy back and the focus back is really, really hard. So one of the greatest disciplines for them is not letting the mind start to entertain alternatives. So, and what it reminds me of is, I remember we had a plum tree in Sacramento, and I cut off some branches because there were too many of them, and the fruit wasn't that good. And it really improved the tree a great deal because the energy wasn't so dispersed through all these many branches. But one of the things that happens, if you've ever done this on a tree, you'll notice the point at which you cut the branch off. You come back a few months later, and you know what you're going to find? You're going to find all these little sucker growths. And they're all attempting, and if you let them stay, what's going to happen is they're going to drain the energy out of the branch that you want to bear fruit. And, you know, we sometimes forget that we're living things. We forget that we're living things. We think our head is some free-floating balloon that's not attached to the earth. We are living beings. And these laws of living things apply to us. So if my mind starts entertaining alternatives to recovery, you know, you start feeling sorry for yourself because, you know, why me, and why do I have to do all of these things, and we start draining the energy back out of this, right? So one more little piece of Latin, if you can tolerate it. Following decision, I lied, actually there's going to be another piece of Latin later. But anyway, decision then permits me to be single-minded. And the Latin word for that is calm. Calm or co. When you put co in front of a word, what does it mean?
Together.
Huh? Together. Like co-conspirator, co-operate, co-defendant, right? So co or calm, depending on what the next letter is, you have either co or calm. It's like E or X for going out. So egress or exit, you know. So calm and co mean together. And mittere is the word to send in Latin. It's the verb to send. We're very familiar with it in California because the first person singular is, which is where we get the word, the California missions. They were sent. They were sent. So they were on a mission, right? They were on a mission. And so this is I send. This here is to send. So what we're talking about then is, and these are terms that were used to describe something very practical